What you're feeling is not tiredness. That's the first thing I need you to understand before we go a single second further. Tiredness goes away with a good night's sleep. You can be tired after a long day, a difficult week, a month of too many obligations, and with adequate rest that resolves. What millions of people over 50 experience is something different entirely. A fatigue that's there when you wake up in the morning after 8 hours of sleep, that doesn't meaningfully improve with rest. That makes every activity cause more energy than it should. That comes with the sense that something fundamental has changed in how your body functions. Even when your blood tests say everything is normal, that pattern has a different name from tiredness. It has a specific, measurable, documented biochemical cause, and it has an intervention protocol that the scientific research has begun to articulate with a clarity I find genuinely encouraging. I'm Dr. Becker. I've spent years reviewing literature on aging biology, cellular metabolism, and mitochondrial physiology. The topic of fatigue in people over 50 is where basic science research connects most directly to people's daily experience. As always, before we go further, what I share here has educational purpose. If you take medication or have any diagnosed condition, speak with your doctor before making changes, especially with the supplements I'm going to mention. There are specific interactions with certain medications you need to know about. Today I'm going to explain 3 things clearly. Why the difference between normal tiredness and what I call a mitochondrial warning signal is real and biochemical, not just conceptual. Which 3 mechanisms of mitochondrial deterioration the research identifies as responsible for the fatigue pattern most people over 50 describe. And the 3-day protocol the evidence documents as capable of partially reversing that deterioration in a sequentially and physiologically ordered way. 3 days, not 3 weeks, not 3 months. Because the protocol is designed to activate first the cleaning, then the creation, then the protection of mitochondria in that specific order that the biology of the mitochondrial renewal system requires. If you find value in this, subscribing helps me keep doing this analysis. I'll only say it once. To understand why mitochondrial fatigue is different from normal tiredness, you need to understand what mitochondria actually do. Every cell in your body that has mitochondria, which is virtually all cells except mature red blood cells, depends on them to produce ATP. ATP is the universal energy currency of biology. Without ATP, there is no muscle contraction, no neurotransmission, no protein synthesis, no temperature regulation, nothing that requires energy, which is everything a living organism does. An active muscle cell has between 1,000 and 2,000 mitochondria per cell. Heart muscle can have up to 5,000 because it never stops beating. Neurons in the brain have thousands because maintaining the membrane potential is energetically extremely expensive. Mitochondria aren't accessory organelles. They are literally the energy infrastructure for everything your body does. And that infrastructure ages. Research in cell metabolism and aging cell documents with quantitative data that mitochondrial function declines approximately 10% per decade after age 40. By 70, mitochondrial oxidative capacity can be reduced by up to 50% compared to age 40. Half the cellular energy capacity. When that happens, the body can keep functioning. The way a car can keep running on half a tank, but the maximum power available is different. And when the system is under any additional demand, the reserve simply isn't there. The difference between normal tiredness and a mitochondrial warning signal is this. Tiredness is a temporary ATP deficit that resolves with rest. The mitochondrial signal is a structural deficit in the capacity to produce ATP that doesn't resolve with rest. Because the problem isn't how much you've spent, it's how much you can produce. Now, the 3 mechanisms, I want you to pay particular attention to the logic of how they connect to each other because that connection is what explains why the intervention has to be sequential. The first mechanism is what I call the maintenance system blackout, and its central character is a molecule called NADLAS. NADX nikotinoamide adenine nucleotide is involved in more than 500 enzymatic reactions in your body. But the function that matters most for this context is its role as the activator of sirtuins, specifically 1 and 3. Think of sirtuins as the supervisors of mitochondrial maintenance. SIRT3 is physically located inside the mitochondria and directly regulates the efficiency of the protein complexes of the respiratory chain. Without actives 3, those complexes become progressively less efficient. But for sirtuins to function, they need NAD as a substrate. They are NAD+ dependent enzymes. And here's the problem. NADH levels fall approximately 50% between ages 40 and 60. This decline is well documented across multiple reviews, including research from David Sinclair's group in Cell Metabolism and Nature Aging and in independent reviews that confirm the same trend in human tissues. When NADH falls below a certain threshold, sirtuins can no longer activate with sufficient efficiency. SIRT1 doesn't activate PGC1 alpha, And when PGC1 alpha doesn't activate, there's no mitochondrial biogenesis. Old damaged mitochondria are not replaced with new ones. The system ages without renewal. The most accurate analogy of our next is the electricity of the cellular energy factory. Without electricity, the maintenance machines, the certain start up the old machines, the day mitochondria don't get replaced. The whole system operates in emergency mode, producing what it can with what it has, but without the capacity to renew itself. The daily consequence is exactly the pattern that describes mitochondrial fatigue. Energy that starts reasonably in the morning and depletes faster than expected. Difficulty recovering after exercise, the sense that the reserve margin has shrunk. The second mechanism is what I call the smoke cycle, and it involves mitochondrial free radicals. Normally functioning mitochondria produce ATP with high efficiency and generate a relatively small amount of free radicals, RAOs, reactive oxygen species, as a byproduct of electron transport. But a damaged mitochondrion with accumulated mutations in its DNA or with deficiencies in its protein complexes has a less efficient electron transport chain. Electrons escape the normal process and react with oxygen to form superoxide and other highly reactive radicals. The critical point is that mitochondrial DNA is extraordinarily vulnerable to that oxidative damage compared to nuclear DNA. Nuclear DNA is protected by histone proteins packaged into chromatin physically separated from the respiratory chain. Mitochondrial DNA, in contrast, is completely exposed in the mitochondrial matrix without histone protection inches away from the complexes generating those free radicals, and mitochondrial DNA repair systems are significantly less efficient than those for nuclear DNA. The result is a positive feedback loop. Damaged mitochondria produce more free radicals. Free radicals damage more mitochondrial DNA. More mutations in mitochondrial DNA produce more dysfunctional mitochondria that produce even more free radicals. The cycle accelerates over time. It's like an engine that loses efficiency and produces more smoke. The smoke damages the engine further. The more damaged engine produces more smoke. Without external intervention that cleans out the damaged mitochondria and replaces them with new ones, the cycle doesn't stop on its own. It simply amplifies. MIFG, the selective elimination process for dysfunctional mitochondria, is the natural quality control mechanism that breaks this cycle. But MIFG also declines with age. The signaling machinery that identifies and eliminates damaged mitochondria becomes less sensitive. Damaged mitochondria accumulate instead of being eliminated. The smoke cycle has fewer interruptions. The third mechanism is the most concrete and in terms of intervention the most actionable. Its main character is CoQ10 coenzyme Q10. CoQ10 is the electron carrier between complexes 1 and 2 and complex 3 of the mitochondrial respiratory chain. It's literally the messenger that carries electrons from one station to the next in the ATP production process. If CoQ10 is insufficient, electrons aren't transferred correctly between the complexes. Instead of completing the cycle and producing ATP, they escape and form superoxide. Less energy produced and more oxidative stress generated simultaneously. A systematic review and meta-analysis published in Aging Research Reviews in 2023 documents that CoQ10 levels decline by up to 65% between ages 20 and 80. That is a massive reduction in the most critical carrier of the respiratory chain. There's an additional factor especially relevant for a significant proportion of people over 50. Statins, the most prescribed cholesterol-lowering medications in the world, reduce endogenous CoQ10 levels by an additional 40%. The mechanism is direct. Statins inhibit HMG-CoA reductase, the enzyme that produces cholesterol. But that same enzyme also participates in CoQ10 synthesis. If you're on statins and experiencing muscle fatigue or muscle pain, which are the most common starting side effects, the biochemical connection to mitochondrial CoQ10 depletion is direct and well documented. That's a specific conversation to have with your doctor. The 3-day protocol is designed with the correct sequence of intervention. First, clean the damaged mitochondria. Then, create new ones. Then protect what's been created. Reversing that sequence is far less effective because stimulating biogenesis without first cleaning the system accumulates new mitochondria in an environment still contaminated by the dysfunctional ones. Day 1 activates MIFG. The most potent and documented mechanism for activating MIFG is fasting. Research published in Nature Cell Biology and Cell Metabolism documents that fasting of 12 to 16 hours activates the proteins PINK1 and PARKIN, which are the master signaling proteins of MIFG. PINK1 accumulates on the outer membrane of dysfunctional mitochondria, recruits PARKIN, and the entire process of labeling and elimination of those mitochondria by the autophagosome is set in motion. The concrete implementation for day 1. Last meal of the previous day at 6 p.m. First meal at noon the following day, 16 hours of fasting. During that window, specifically in the morning of day 1, a 30-minute brisk walk in the fasted state amplifies the MIFG signal and directly activates PGC1 alpha. The combination of low glycogen plus moderate aerobic exercise is one of the most potent mitochondrial renewal signals we know of, requiring no drug or supplement. If you also start CoQ10 Yukino, the reduced more bioavailable form at 200 mg taken with your first meal containing some fat for absorption, you're supporting the function of the mitochondria that survive the cleaning process, while the damaged ones are being eliminated. Day 2 is biogenesis, creating new efficient mitochondria. Research on it, high-intensity interval training in the Journal of Physiology and the American Journal of Physiology documents that a single episode of high-intensity exercise can elevate PGC1 alpha mRNA levels up to tenfold within the first hours. For older adults with moderate fitness levels, you don't need sprints. 8 intervals of 20 seconds at a perceived exertion of 7 to 8 out of 10, followed by 10 seconds of rest on a stationary bike, brisk uphill walk, or any modality that's accessible and safe for you are sufficient to generate that biogenesis signal. Day 2 is also when to initiate NAD plus support. MN-nicotinamide mononucleotide and its alternative N-R-nicotinamide riboside are NAD's precursors that in Phase 2 clinical trials in humans have shown the ability to partially restore NAD's levels in skeletal muscle. The study dose is in the range of 250 to 500 mg daily, taken fasted in the morning. The long-term safety evidence for NMN and NR in humans is still developing, with most long-duration trials currently ongoing as of this recording, so the conservative 250 mg dose is preferable until we have more data. Turmeric with black pepper at the Day 2 meal contributes by activating EMPK and the NRF2 factor, the mitochondrial protection system against oxidative stress. Day 3 is protection, consolidating and maintaining what the first 48 hours have initiated. 2 of Day 3's interventions stand out to me for the specificity of their mechanisms. The first is morning cold exposure. The last 30 to 60 seconds of your shower with cold water, starting gradually if you're not accustomed, activates the uncoupling protein UCP1 in brown adipose tissue. Brown adipose tissue, unlike normal white adipose tissue that stores energy, is specialized in producing heat. Brown fat mitochondria run the electron transport cycle without fully coupling it to ATP production, dissipating energy as heat instead. Research in Cell Metabolism and Nature Metabolism documents that regular cold exposure increases mitochondrial density in brown adipose tissue and improves multiple parameters of basal energy metabolism. One important precaution: cold exposure is not recommended for people with severe uncontrolled hypertension without consulting a doctor first. The second intervention on Day 3 is morning sunlight exposure. There's a mechanism that doesn't get discussed nearly enough. Sunlight, specifically the red and near-infrared wavelengths between 600 and 900 nanometers, which are abundant in morning light before HNV de dome, penetrates the skin and surface tissues and is directly absorbed by cytochrome C oxidase, the complex 4 of the mitochondrial respiratory chain. Cytochrome C oxidase contains copper metal centers that absorb these wavelengths, and that absorption produces a conformational change that increases the catalytic efficiency of complex 4. More electrons complete the reduction of oxygen to water. More protons are pumped across the inner mitochondrial membrane. More ATP is synthesized, and the proportion of electrons that escape the process and form free radicals decreases. Efficiency goes up and oxidative damage goes down simultaneously. This is direct photobiology. Morning sunlight activates mitochondria photochemically without needing a metabolic intermediary. The light penetrates the skin, reaches the cells of surface tissues and activates complex 4. A direct recharge of the batteries and completely free. 10 to 20 minutes of direct sunlight exposure in the first 2 hours after waking without sunglasses. So the light signal also reaches the retina and synchronizes the circadian clock. Face, arms, any reasonable exposed skin. Most people over 60 spend mornings indoors. They're wasting the most potent and free mitochondrial activation signal available every single day. Magnesium malate at 300 mg per day completes the Day 3 protocol. Malate is a direct substrate of the mitochondrial Kb cycle, the central metabolic process that feeds the respiratory chain. Magnesium is a co-actor in dozens of mitochondrial reactions. Magnesium malate, specifically in that chelated form, has greater bioavailability for mitochondrial functions than the magnesium oxide found in cheaper supplements. There are contraindications I need to mention explicitly. CoQ10 at 200 mg may reduce the anti-global effect of warfarin. If you take warfarin, consult your doctor before starting it. The 16th-hour fast in type 1 diabetics requires medical supervision due to hypoglycemia risk. Heat in people with an unassessed cardiac condition requires medical clearance first, always. And if you've had severe fatigue for more than 4 weeks that doesn't improve with any intervention, the first step isn't optimizing mitochondria. It's ruling out hypothyroidism, iron deficiency anemia, and diagnose type 2 diabetes and sleep apnea. All treatable medical conditions that produce exactly that pattern of persistent fatigue. The results timeline that research documents is the following. in the first 1 to 3 days of the protocol, especially if Foggy activates effectively and dysfunctional mitochondria that were generating constant oxidative stress are eliminated. Many people report early signs of more morning energy, not a dramatic change but a reduction in the heaviness of the first hours of the day. During weeks 1 and 2, sustained energy improvement begins to appear as biogenesis generates new, more efficient mitochondria. By month 1, oxidative stress markers, including urinary 8-isoprostane and high-sensitivity CRP if you have access to them, begin moving in the right direction. At months 2 and 3, mitochondrial muscle function shows measurable improvement in terms of strength, endurance, and post-exercise recovery speed. One final observation I want to leave you with, because I think it's important for the right perspective. The research documenting mitochondrial decline and aging is simultaneously the research documenting the partial reversibility of that decline with specific interventions. Those two things coexist in the same literature. The deterioration is real. The intervention has real effect. We're not talking about unsupported promises. We're talking about biology documented in both directions. We started with the distinction between tiredness and a mitochondrial warning signal. The research reveals 3 interconnected mechanisms. The NADDEF's collapse that shuts down mitochondrial maintenance through the SARUT, the RAW cycle that accelerates damage faster than repair systems can keep pace, and the CoQ10 depletion that fails the electron transport in the respiratory chain. The 3-day protocol works in the biologically correct sequence. First clean with Foggy, then create with biogenesis, then protect with the right stimuli. The refrain that matters most to me from this research: fatigue in people over 50 is not inevitable aging. It's a biological process with identifiable causes and documented interventions. Don't resign yourself to the tiredness. Understand it. If this topic interested you, the next video goes deep into why after age 60, the mitochondrial decline accelerates at roughly 3 times the rate of any other decade, and what specific morning window the research identifies as the most effective time to slow it down. Comment below if you recognize that pattern yourself, the fatigue that doesn't yield to rest. I'm interested to know how many people watching this recognize exactly that experience and what you've tried so far. Keep investigating and I'll see you in the next one. Dr.